views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. We got a really good show for you today, as we always do. We talk to Bronx reporters on this program, give you an idea who they are, what they're thinking about, what they're writing about, give you a little background so you know when you read something or you watch something or you see a photograph, you get an idea of who took it, who wrote it, and what they're all about. So tonight we are going to start off with David Cruz, our good friend who's the editor of the Norwood News. Nice to have you with us, David.
Thank you, guys.
For people who don't know, the program is recorded in the late afternoon on Thursday, and so just a matter of minutes ago, the New York City Council overwhelmingly passed the Jerome Avenue rezoning, which hits part of your catchment area, the northern part of the rezoning. Overwhelmingly passed. I guess you're not surprised that that happened.
Correct. Yeah, this was already in the cards, especially after the committee vote by Land Use Committee. So it was really just formalizing what was already going to be set in stone. The idea of just rezoning these 92 blocks of what's overwhelmingly a very poor section of the Bronx, perhaps the poorest section of the Bronx. And so, you know, as far as I can tell, it's a huge win for Councilwoman Vanessa Gibson, who's been essentially the leading voice in getting this rezoning through. And also the idea of, you know, she knows that this is probably a gamble. She kind of admitted that in a very, very implicit way, that, you know, we are taking a gamble and seeing the redevelopment of this area, but, you know, they don't want to be stuck in the past. They kind of want to move forward and bring in more affordable housing to the neighborhood.
It's interesting. I just happened to be on Jerome Avenue recently and driving, actually I was going southbound, and the number of auto body stores on that strip is just remarkable. When you look at what they got back, I mean, they talked about a total $189 million investment, and I've got a list of some of them, 2,500 units of housing, $60 million of that will go to parks. Let's start with, there was $1.5 million go to a fund to help auto businesses relocate. I got to tell you, that doesn't sound like a lot of money.
No.
And many of those businesses, I don't see any other way other than they're going to be displaced. Was that a legitimate reason to say, well, wait a minute, let's take care of them? Or is this just, I hate to put it this way, the price of some progress, that it's inevitable that somebody's going to get hurt?
Right, and I think that's really what it is.
You agree with that?
Yes,
said right.
It's definitely pretty much a give and take. In order for them to build affordable housing, they obviously need to change the zoning distinctions to allow for the housing. Where the auto workers are right now is a prime space for them to actually bring in more residential housing. So they want to change the distinctions from an M district to an R district, and of course that means that the existing auto body shops will end up getting hurt.
But you have to credit them, and I interviewed Councilmember Gibson on Bronx Talk, and she said, you know, unless I get certain amenities, unless I get something, I will vote no, which is a strong thing to say in this climate where the home council member generally dictates the direction that the whole council will go. You got to credit them, congratulate them. They got 2 schools with 450 seats in each school. You know, new schools, that's a pretty good get, in addition to $60 million infrastructure investment into parks, which never happens in the
these
city.
Kinds of rezonings.
These kind of rezoning. So I think on that level that's a victory.
On paper, it is. It is a good victory because you are bringing in more schools to what is already a very heavily congested neighborhood. But remember, this rezoning will bring in more people, so it may not offset the population of the current school district right now. It's, you know, just you're going to add more population. That means you're going to add more kids. So
you built
already
the school to do that, but you're not really alleviating any current problems.
correct, exactly.
Do you make, and you studied this, and I want to move on because you have some other really important issues that were in the Norwood News in the current edition. Do you relate this kind of, for want of a better term, benefits agreement to what was done when the Kingsbridge Armory agreements were made? Is there a similarity here? And I'll go one step further back. You had Yankee Stadium and you had the filtration plant. These were big deals in the Bronx, and there was a give back. We don't have to recount history about what happened with those. I had the sense that this was a similar negotiation as the kind of negotiation that Northwest Bronx and the community members did at the Armory.
Since the city is essentially the other side of this.
That if you want to do this, this is what we need back.
That's true, but I also do think that these housing groups were looking at what was happening in the other rezoning plans across the city, especially with East New York and East Harlem. They were all kind of going on at the same time, so they clearly did not want to repeat the mistakes that happened in those other rezonings, where they got something, but they didn't get a whole lot.
My last point about this, and then we will move on, is that one of the council members, and I watched the proceedings, one of the council members, I think it was Jumaane Williams from Brooklyn, said that mandatory inclusionary housing, that itself was the problem, and that needs to be relooked at for the future, and that we made a mistake when we passed that originally. Historically, does this now become the fulcrum to take a look at all these rezonings and say, well, wait a minute, maybe we can handle it a little differently in the future?
Kind of, because the New York City does not have that many city-owned properties anymore, so they are essentially beholden to developers. And so MIH is intended to work as a guarantee that there will be some affordable housing in place, simply because the developer will need the tax subsidy, but at the same time, the city will fulfill its promise of building affordable housing. And so, they will always be dependent on developers to help execute MIH.
Speaking of housing, David authored this really remarkable piece, and it cuts right to the core of many of the issues. It is a lengthy 2-page piece, and I got to tell you, for all the work you did, I just love this graphic, which talks about ethnic diversity, or where people are living in the Bronx. The title of it is "The Legal Challenge to Desegregate the City." Talk to me about New York City housing, and segregation or desegregation.
So New York City is deeply segregated ethnically. Apparently, there's enclaves of black, white, Hispanic, all kind of just living separately. And so one lawyer
and the numbers bear that out.
Correct.
Right? You're not just making a statement based on your own judgment.
That graph was taken, those numbers were taken from the Department of City Planning. And so there's a lawyer who's essentially challenging a housing law that is appears to be promoting segregation within the cities, called community preference, where if an affordable housing unit building is being built within a given neighborhood, the existing community will be allowed to, they're given preference. And that's a problem, because in an already segregated city, by having community preference in play, you're just reinforcing it, meaning that if a black family from an overwhelmingly black neighborhood wants to go in and live in affordable housing in a neighborhood that they already live in, this puts a white family at a disadvantage in going into that housing, and vice versa. And so there's no sense of integration taking place within the city of New York.
We have been through this. We were through this. I remembered as a young man growing up in the Bronx in the 60s, and there was the busing and trying to force integration. How do you desegregate a city? This is probably a 4-hour discussion that we need, and we're going to ask them to give me a 2-minute answer. But how do you begin to eat that away so that we truly have people living and working together?
Well, the way to do it is really, it falls in the hands of the local politicians who fall within a said district. So the problem is that most local politicians tend to be guided by their constituency. So if the constituency wants to keep things status quo,
or is of a singular predominating ethnicity, they are generally, because that is the way people vote and behave.
Correct. And the thing is, local city council members are wholly dependent on their constituents to keep them in office. So of course they want to do what they ask of them. So if there's, say, an affordable housing proposal coming into a neighborhood and the neighborhood doesn't want it, well, guess what? The council person will not want it.
I mean, it's almost like hearkening back to the discussion we just had about the rezoning. So then you're saying that somebody's got to take the lead on this, and it might be, whether it be a council member or a state delegation.
Well, right now the only entity that can really truly desegregate is the court system, and the court system would have to impose fines in New York City to make it happen.
Which is highly unlikely. I guess I would have to ask, is it necessary to do this?
To desegregate the city? Yeah. The problem with segregation, and numerous studies have pointed this out, is that it siphons a lot of city resources from a given neighborhood. And it's been known to happen.
And it gives people an opportunity to say, you get and you don't get, and then you've got a problem. But if you have an integrated neighborhood, resources are shared. Okay, before you go, or before I throw you out of here, there is also, David and the Norwood News are so great with collaborations, collaborating with BronxNet Television and WFUV. They call it the Bronx Food Fight. Talk to me about hungry people in the Bronx and what this story is all about.
So we're running a 5-part series on food insecurity in the Bronx. We've already published 2 of them. The second one that was just featured there was the issue of the Federal Supplement Nutrition Assistance Program. Essentially, the report is outlining how there are some shortcomings to the program, which forces a lot of people to heavily depend on food pantries to sort of just fill in the gap, especially towards the end of the month.
Right, and maybe the most visible of them in maybe the city is part of the solution, which of course is in your catchment area. Dave, we will have a 4-hour show next time, so we can really get into all the things. But you are just a wonderful guest. We love having you with us, and please, folks, pick it up on your local newsstand, read it online, go to their Facebook page, do what you can. You want to know what's going on in the Norwood News, edited by the gentleman who's here, David Cruz. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a break, and then guess what? We're going to bring on a rookie. We will bring on the newest, and I'm going to call him hotshot writer because he's a really good writer and a really good reporter. Alex Mitchell from the Bronx Times will join us in just a moment. Your first chance to meet him. Don't go away.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self. And I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry. Go along, son.
It's always worth it.
Whoa, master!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
We are there, day one, with baby names and a gift that lasts a lifetime. We are there as you grow, protecting you and those you love. And we are there as you start your next chapter. We are with you through life's journey. We are Social Security, securing today and tomorrow. Get to know us at socialsecurity.gov.
This video produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Me and my boy Matt had it good. He had catnip that was off the hook. But one day, he brings a girl home, and she's allergic to cats. Every sneeze was a nail in my coffin. Now I'm in a shelter. It's decent, but they don't even have Wi-Fi.
Okie dokie, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. And drum roll, please, because Alex Mitchell is here for the first time. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you, and welcome aboard.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
Alex is the new reporter, or a new reporter, with the Bronx Times reporter. So before we even get into some of the stories, and you had a nice exclusive that we're going to talk about, and some other things, let's meet you. So where are you from, and how did you get into journalism?
So I am from a little town called Massapequa in Nassau County on Long Island.
We'll make sure not to hold that against him. That's
okay.
fine.
You know, I would like to clear some misnomers up about the island that I've heard, and I was personally offended when I was told I live in Met country, because I do not.
Oh, there you go.
I live in the heart of Yankees country, and you know, everything about the bagels and Billy Joel, that's true.
So wait, you still live there and come to the Bronx?
Yes, I do.
Wow.
It's a lovely commute. So,
and what's your background in journalism?
My background in journalism is I have recently graduated of Hofstra University.
Okay.
This May,
So
and
you really are a Long Island boy.
Yep, I'm the Long Island rookie, and
Okay.
I'm loving every minute of it.
Mhm.
So,
And so you graduated from there and got your job at the Bronx Times. How long have you been there? A couple
I
of months?
have been there coming up on 2 months.
2 months.
So.
And so what's your impression? I love getting outsiders, so to speak. You're going to be an insider before you know it. But your impression of the Bronx and covering the Bronx as you have gone from assignment to assignment.
You know, it's a very exciting place, and this is a community that demands to be heard. And that is something exciting, and I admire that, and I've spoken to a lot of great people, and everybody has a story, and that's something exciting. That's something you don't get everywhere.
For a journalist, you know, you walk out the door right here and say, hey, what do you got? And I'm sure you'll come
Probably
up with
get 10,
yes,
to be honest.
Exactly right. And if you say people need to be heard, and I know this as a person, a TV talk show guy, you probably feel that responsibility to tell that story as a reporter.
You know, growing up, I talked too much, and now I'm putting it to good use.
There you go. What excites you about being a journalist? What excites you about, aside from the Bronx, and listen, you don't have to sell me or any of our viewers on the Bronx, but what excites you about doing that job?
I like to think I get paid to talk and write, and that's something that people do every day and don't have the
don't get paid for it.
Really, they don't, and it's something I love to do. I have a lot of energy. I love to tell stories, and I realize that there are people very interesting out there, and they deserve to have a voice too, and I like to do that.
Let's get right into some of the stuff you've done. When we greeted each other earlier, you said make sure you know about the story I did with these guys who were creating bombs in the Bronx. And you uncovered an aspect, I mean, the story was widely reported, but you uncovered an aspect that nobody else had. Good work for a rookie, for a guy just coming to the Bronx.
Yeah,
Tell us all about the story.
So the story is on Christian and Tyler Toro. They were twin brothers living in Pelham Parkway. One had taught at a middle school, or correct me, high school in Harlem, and the other was a Shake Shack manager. They had been following conspiracy theories on the internet, and the FBI and NYPD had raided their apartment, finding 30 pounds of bomb-making materials and threatening words and encrypted messages. And I had traced some of the messages back to the rabbit hole on the internet that they came from. I had actually been communicating with a source in Europe who did some of the heavy lifting for me,
Wow.
and that source had been researching it for some time. And what we had found out was they were playing something called an alternate reality game. And what that really is like the Da Vinci Code that you can play through the internet. Only the contents and the subject of it, it wasn't the Renaissance. It was much darker. It had involved serial killers, cults, Roman gods, and a lot of dark stuff. And that's part of the conspiracy-esque part to this. And police had said that this was part of the reason why they were doing what they did, was because of the influence that this game or games had played, because it's possible that they were playing more than one, and I had found out that the creator had actually come clean when this happened, admitting
the creator,
that the creator of the game,
okay.
I should say.
The creator, I thought, there are people who would interpret that a different way, but I just
not that guy up there, but the creator of the game had come out saying that the phrase that was recovered by the FBI had directly come from the game, had shut it down, and said, these guys, they weren't what we were intending, and tried to pull away from it. But nevertheless, what it left me wondering, were there other people out there who were taking this too far? Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if you heard, but there was another one of these style games saying that the world was ending on April 18th. And I can debunk that right now. It is not.
Thank goodness.
I have Yankees tickets the night before, so I really hope not, especially if it goes into extra innings. So.
I don't know. You better start hitting.
But yeah, so that was interesting, and I had found a lot of information that hadn't been uncovered, and that being, I want to say, my 5th assignment.
That was pretty good.
That was pretty wild, and these two guys are being held without bail right now, and were indicted.
Right. We have all learned in America about all of these, you called it, these games, these influences. This is really what is fueling so much of what is going on with people like this who are wanting to do harm. So if they have a proclivity toward it, this is what inspires them and makes them think, aha. What it reminds me of, and I'm a lot older than you, is Charlie Manson.
Yeah.
Is that Manson heard these devil, lyrics in Beatles songs in Helter Skelter, and then translated that to mean that he was supposed to do mayhem. Sounds very similar to what you reported here.
That's a very good comparison, and I imagine if these guys were around at the time of Charles Manson, they would have been pretty buddy-buddy with him.
But the problem is, and the difference then, is you had much more limited sources, potential sources, record albums, something on the radio, and that's about it. Now, the internet, of course, and social media makes it the potential unlimited, and we're seeing it everywhere.
That's what completely fueled their interest, their desire, and just their motive.
Let's talk about some of the other things. I mean, they've had you covering, a blocked fire hydrant and, those kinds of things. You did a story about fentanyl drugs being confiscated. Do you like those kinds of hard news stories? I mean, do you see yourself like that? Or is that part of the job you do? I mean, you can be truthful.
I'll put it this way.
We won't tell any of the people, my Laura and my other buddies over there at the Bronx Times.
It's a lot different than suburban Long Island, and that interests me, and especially when I'm dealing with hard crime stories where I could help get a suspect apprehended. That I feel like I'm helping people when I bring awareness to this.
Right, and especially in the story you did about the $10 million of fentanyl that was recovered. That really has a chance to save some people's lives.
Absolutely, and actually, as of recent, which will be coming out tomorrow, there's another story that there's a potential connection to a Baltimore pipeline and the man who was hiding the fentanyl inside fish and chili and other things that shouldn't be consumed with opioids. So
that's a story you're doing?
Yes, that will be coming out tomorrow.
Tomorrow, that'll be Friday in the Bronx Times, so
Absolutely.
We can all check it out. You also wrote, and this, of course, widely reported, the plan to put a jail down in the South Bronx, and we were commenting, I was editorializing beforehand, even if you like the idea, in this day and age, given the climate in the Bronx where people are so into control and our own destiny, to have a plan like that come out without any consultation, boy, I just don't see how that works.
I was confused by the lack of communication, but what really confused me is I understand that Rikers Island needs changes to be made. However, the ideal part of the location itself, not talking about the reform or how things are done, is that it's an island. There's no property being devalued around it.
You're talking about it at Rikers Island?
Yes.
Yes.
And if you want to reduce inmate population, if you want to do prison reform, that's one thing. But I believe you should keep it on the island because, well, PS 65 is 2 blocks from where the new jail would be built. Now you're putting a jail around children, and I don't understand that. I was confused by it, and I think a lot of other people were too.
Certainly in the Bronx they were. You made an interesting point also. The Bronx Point development, which is going on down, I guess, just north of there.
Half a mile away.
Half a mile away. So you're bringing a whole new community in. You're ostensibly going to have the Hip Hop Museum. They're breaking ground, I understand, in
That's
2019.
another story I did on. And I just remember when I heard about the jail, I was like, wait a second, this sounds really close to where the Hip Hop Museum is going. So you're bringing a tourist attraction right off, the major Deegan, and then you put
where you want people to, not only people who live there, but you want people to come from elsewhere.
Absolutely. You have, I believe it's the Willis Avenue Bridge. You have plenty of access to it, and then you're putting something that's going to want to keep people away, and I don't understand.
Before we let you go, I'm just curious about fascinating kind of question. What kind of introduction or research did you need to do before you got started? Or when you just walked out, frankly, in the streets of the Bronx, you got all the education you needed? Or did you have to say, let me find out what's going on in the neighborhoods?
It's funny you say that because on my first day in, I was there for about an hour just setting up my email, and I was told that there was a protest going on in Co-op City over the massive billboards.
The billboards, right, that people were complaining about.
And they won that battle, so that's exciting for them. But I was just told, okay, here you go. Here's your first story. So not even, I barely put my coat down and I'm out in the field.
And you got a pretty good taste of the Bronx, even with that story. And that's what you were saying when you started, that people in the Bronx, we got something to say.
Everyone's got a story. And, the people that I've talked to and the staff that I have around me have made it a very exciting and great 2 months.
Well, as you know, Alex, I take Bronx media very seriously. I read everything. You have been, so far, a tremendous addition to our little family of reporters.
Thank you.
And we're thrilled that the Bronx Times has you, and we certainly look forward to seeing, reading, and hearing more about everything you're doing at the Bronx Times Reporter.
Oh, thank you very much.
And you know what else is going to, by the way, here's the Bronx Times Reporter. Make sure you pick it up, read it online. Whoa, I'm losing some of the
Got some coupons there now.
Some coupons, oh my goodness. But make sure you pick it up and read it, and check them out on Facebook or wherever you can. Alex, we'll see you around. We're going to have you back on the show, I'm sure.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right. We are going to say, guess what? Good night. See you next time on the Bronx Buzz. Monday night on Bronx Talk, we expect to do the Jerome Avenue rezoning, and we will have the council members involved in that plan on the program. So there you go. Good night.